Not all Christians or Muslims or Jews are necessarily creationists. Some of each of these groups are, but not all of any of them. Creationism is when a believer specifically rejects the scientific theory of evolution, in whole or in part, and more generally rejects methodological naturalism, also known as the scientific method, wanting instead to evoke supernatural miracles, i.e., magic, in place of natural explanations. This is done out of a fallacious argument from an erroneously assumed authority on top of a literal interpretation of the sacred fables of whatever faith the faithful were born into. In the United States, we have more Christians than we have of any other religion, and we have more creationists than I think any other country, meaning a higher percentage of people who reject science than anywhere else in the world. Some of them pretend as if our planet is the center of the universe, or that the world is flat with the sun orbiting around us, or that there's no such thing as outer space. Creationism is always a rejection of reality. It's just a question of how much reality believers reject. A few even argue that reality isn't real, and that everything we perceive to be real is just a simulation, as if there's a point to simulating reality when there is no original reality to simulate. All of these are effectively subsets of creationism, and more specifically, young Earth creationism. Yet, nearly all of the pioneers of evolutionary theory were Christian, and many of evolution's modern champions still, today, are Christian biologists, geologists, paleontologists, geneticists, and so on. They're just not creationists because they know that the Bible is not entirely accurate. So accepting demonstrable reality doesn't necessarily mean rejecting theism. At worst, it only means rejecting a dogmatically literal reading of what are literally fairy tales or fables that we already know can't be true anyway, and that cannot be sincerely believed rationally or reasonably, not by anyone who actually knows anything about this. Yet, the wanna pretenders are determined to pull the wool down over their own eyes, often even when they already know better, because some people honestly don't care what the truth is. They have a deep-seated emotional need to believe something else instead, for irrational emotional reasons that don't make logical sense. Of course, there are a whole lot of people who really do believe in creationism sincerely, partly because they don't know anything about science, or because even the most ridiculous stories can be accepted if you heard it all your life, since you were a little kid, and everyone you love and respect believes that too. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, you'll just assume, as many people do, that the people who know more than you must be able to explain it such that it would make sense if you were to ask them, because why else would they believe it? However, if you do question your religious leaders, you will quickly find out that they don't really know what they're talking about, neither regarding the science they reject, nor even the religion they promote. They don't actually know anything they pretend to. But they have to promote it anyway, because religion is a multi-trillion-dollar international business where you don't have to know anything, and the only thing you have to do is lie well enough to convince credulous congregations who are already desperate to believe you. It's a business that offers not only excessive wealth to the top performers, but also impressive political power as well, at every level of the social hierarchy, because people love their fantasies, and they will pay dearly to preserve their preferred delusions. That's why they assert baseless speculation as if it was a matter of fact, pretending to know things no one even can know. Behaviors that we would normally classify as lying in any other profession or application, except when religion does it, as every religion always does. My favorite quote from Abraham Lincoln was when he said, "I believe it is an established maxim in morals that he who makes an assertion without knowing whether it is true or false is guilty of falsehood, and the accidental truth of the assertion does not justify or excuse him." For that reason, we could say that religion is fraudulent by definition, being an intentional perversion of truth in order to induce another to part with something of value or to surrender a legal right. Normally, that would be a criminal offense, but for whatever reason, it is legally permissible and culturally accepted whenever religion does it, and every religion does. Of course, it only works if everyone else believes the same thing that you do. If you're the only believer, then you'll be rejected as insane. The only way your favorite fantasy will feel real even to you is if other people believe it too. And you almost have to start with children, because grown-ups will just point out that the moon is not split in two, or that there is no way that a snake can talk. If you can crush a child's natural curiosity by prohibiting inquiry as a damnable sin, then that child will likely never regain their ability to think critically or distinguish fact from fiction. So eventually you have a population of adults who grew up indoctrinated and who are now inculcating their own kids in their faith. And they're all under the direct control of whoever is the head of their house of worship. Because that's what religion is all about, manipulation of the masses. Of course, they all have to believe the same thing, don't they? And mixing Christians and Muslims with Hindus and pagans will make them all atheists eventually. It's like when there are a few children who are all playing together and every one of them is pretending that they're Batman. They can't all be Batman. Someone has to play someone else, either a different hero or a regular person, maybe even a villain. Any decently run universe can only allow one actual Batman at a time. It's the same way when every kid has a different story of creation, all attributed to different gods. Or when there are mutually exclusive and contradictory accounts of history being attributed to the same god, or when a history of events is erroneously attributed to any god when none are evidently implicated. I treat arguments against God and religion as a separate topic from arguing against creationism, which is a form of religious extremism, ignoring or rejecting reality to substitute a favorite fantasy instead. So in this video, from here on, while some of the things I say may be applicable to theism and other forms of spirituality in general, I am here only referring to creationism, and specifically biblical creationism, on which Judaism, Christianity, and even Islam are all based, though they all have a different slant on the same story. In each of these faiths, there are some people who actually do want to understand whatever is really true, even if it's not what they were taught to believe, and even if it's not what they want to believe. Some people would rather take an ugly truth over a beautiful lie, because the truth matters and should matter more than whatever we might rather believe. Some people don't want to pretend. They want to know, or at least have some degree of real understanding. Thus, the religious community needs to fool those people into thinking that creationism is somehow reasonable and scientific. Other folks are happy to believe whatever they were told to, but they still need help to be convinced that the truth is a lie and only their lies are true. They literally want to be misled. In either case, religious apologists take up the profession of lying for a living, to convince the rational few that creationism is somehow scientific and that science is religious. The job of the apologist is also to assure the faith of the wanna-pretenders by projecting all their own faults onto the opposition and by trying to make up any excuse necessary to rationalize or justify all the impossible perversities, immoral atrocities, and illogical absurdities in their doctrine in defense of a false but authoritarian narrative, or to systematically discredit, dismiss, and ignore any and all evidence against their primary assumption. I mean, you have some bigwigs like Stephen Meyer or Ken Ham pretending as if they don't know that they're full of shit, but even their associates know that it's all a game of make-believe, where you have to find some way to convince yourself that it's true, even when you already know that it isn't and can't be. Now, how do we know this? Because the arguments for religion and for religiously motivated politics are not like the way anyone argues over anything else. Given any other topic where it's not just a matter of opinion, but where there is potentially discernible truth, then determining which of two mutually exclusive conclusions is the truth would require evaluating all the relevant facts and evidence. Not so with religious belief, which relies instead on misguided feelings and logical fallacies. Faith actively refuses admission of critically damaging evidence or logical contradiction. For example, years ago, I posted a video challenging creationists to show that there is any truth to their position whatsoever. Any actual fact that can be both objectively verified to be true and which is also positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with their preferred position or conclusion over any other. Not one believer even attempted to answer that challenge. Instead, the most any of them can give is that their favorite folklore tells this story, as if the claim is evidence of itself. Which, if you believe in authoritarian doctrine, well, I guess that's true. But if you don't believe in authorities, if you're like me, you think that arguments from authority are worthless, then no, you're going to need evidence because authorities can be wrong and often are. The claim can't be evidence of itself, as if the Quran is the absolute inerrant truth throughout, despite everything wrong with it, or as if the Bible is God's infallible word, even when it contradicts itself, even when both of these books contradict each other, and they both contradict science as well. Their claim is only considered evidence by them, and then only for whatever their authorities say, not for anything the actual experts say, because of the fallacy of the double standard. Otherwise, the only response I got from believers were fallacious arguments from ignorance and incredulity, claiming falsely that science can't explain this or that, as if religion does explain those things, which it doesn't and can't. Don't tell me how science can't explain how everything came from nothing, because creationists are the ones who believe in creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, not us. I don't know any atheist alive who believes that everything came from nothing. Certainly most of us don't believe that. And telling me that a tomb was empty, even if that was true, that would not in any way imply that enchanted fruit can magically bestow knowledge of right and wrong. And don't tell me to explain how life came to be, because that's putting the burden of proof on me, for one, and two, you won't listen to the explanation, and you'll automatically reject it all anyway because it's an aspect of chemical theory, and it happened billions of years ago, and you reject everything we know and can show to be true about any of that. And plus, you're in no position to shift the burden of proof onto anyone else when your explanation is that a magic invisible man said abracadabra. The burden of proof is on the one making the positive claim. You don't get to assert any lie you like and then pretend like that's the truth until or unless we can prove it wrong. Believers got all of that backwards. If you say you merely believe something, that's fine. We don't care. The only thing that matters is why you believe it. Why should we believe it too? If you say that it's the truth, then you have the burden of proof to show the evidence to back your assertion. If you can't do that, then we're done. We evoke Hitchens' razor, that positive claims require positive evidence, and that what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. In which case, the case for creationism is dismissed as insubstantive due to a lack of evidence. If you're a creationist yourself, then understand that if creationism was true, there would be evidence of it, but there isn't. And you want to discuss the evidence you think there is, I'm game for that, because that's what I do for a living. If creationism was true, there wouldn't be so much evidence against it like there is, and there wouldn't be the mountain of proof for evolution either, like I can actually show you. You can't show me any evidence for creation, but I can show you tons of it, literally tons of it for evolution. That's how one-sided that is. So that's one challenge left unanswered by creationists, and I am confident that it will never be answered. I can readily, easily, and immediately show all manner of truth to evolution, but creationism depends entirely on frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies because there is absolutely no truth to it whatsoever. But there are a hell of a lot of lies throughout all of it. And that wasn't the only formal challenge that I've issued to creationists that they have uniformly failed to address. There are two more in this series upcoming.